Hi, well, welcome to part 2 of what you need to know before hiring a contractor, a webinar that was conducted in mid-December. This is our follow-up program. It's sponsored by the North Coast Builders Exchange. If you're not familiar with us, we're a contractors association with nearly 1,200 members in Sonoma, Lake, Mendocino, and Napa counties. I'm Keith Woods, Chief Executive Officer of the Builders Exchange. I'm going to moderate this webinar part 2 program today. If you missed the first webinar, I strongly recommend that you go to our Builders Exchange website, www.ncbeonline.com. That's ncbeonline.com. And there you'll find a button you can click that allows you to listen to the very first webinar that we did in December. It's a little over an hour long, but it has 10 very valuable tips on rebuilding or even just building your home that will help you when you're searching for a contractor. And you can easily download the 10 tips. In this program, we're going to answer some of the most frequent questions that we've been asked by fire victims and homeowners and even people that are just interested in remodeling or rebuilding. And our goal today is to, still the same as it was the first program, we just want those of you who lost homes in the wildfires that devastated the North Bay in October to become better prepared for when you meet with contractors to plan your rebuilding. We're lucky to have the 2 experienced contractors who were part of the original webinar back with us for this session. With us today, Mike Beeler. He's the general manager of Beeler Construction Company in Santa Rosa, and he's a real veteran of the construction industry, having been in it for over 35 years. Our other expert guest today, Craig Lawson, is president of Cal Custom Building Services, Inc., also headquartered in Santa Rosa, and Craig's been in the construction business for 39 years. Both of these gentlemen are members of our Builders Exchange Board of Directors, and I can assure you they are widely respected in the construction industry. Gentlemen, welcome, and let's get started. Mike, I'll lob the first one to you, and Craig, just jump in. We're going to keep this very informal and conversational, and I'll give instructions at the end as to where you can get further advice and listen to this interview and this post-webinar program again. Mike, question we received from somebody who listened to our very first program. Their comment was, we found your webinar to be very informative, and we appreciated the input from the experts. But we looked at the Contractor State License Board website regarding bonding, and the value of the bond that a contractor is required to put down is only $15,000. That seems rather small, the question goes on, especially when we are talking about rebuilding a home for well over $400,000. Can somebody explain more about the bond and how does that serve to protect the client? Mike, a good question?
Yeah, that's a good question. CSLB actually says that the bonds filed for the benefit of consumers who may be damaged as a result of defective construction or other license law violations, and for the benefit of employees who have not been paid wages that are due to them. But at the end of the day, you're right, it's a pretty small amount. And there's actually additional remedies that homeowners have through their contract with the general contractor, and that's why we always recommend that you have an attorney review your contracts.
Craig?
Yeah, to that I would also add, even though that the question wasn't pointed towards this, is that a homeowner should insist the general contractor carry liability insurance with a minimum $1 million limit and name the homeowner as additional insured on the policy so the homeowner is protected for loss or damages.
Yeah, one more time on the amount in case someone's taking notes here.
$1 million minimum liability insurance coverage.
Is that standard?
No, not necessarily. You can obtain coverage limits lower than that, but that should be a minimum amount a homeowner should insist upon.
Good advice. Question number 2 that we received after the mid-December webinar. A fire victim asked us, noted that we had a contractor who stopped and talked to us recently when we were at our burned out home site. He asked us how much the insurance company was going to give us to rebuild, and we told him $500,000. The contractor said he would guarantee to us to build it for $475,000 if we signed up with him. The question is what he said legal to do? And as a follow-up, is it something we should consider, since we don't have any extra money to spend, and it sounds like we could save $25,000? Craig?
I'm of the opinion if somebody tells you something that's too good to be true,
It probably
is. You know, if somebody approached a homeowner with that kind of an offering, the first thing I would do is consult with legal counsel to make sure that you're protected in whatever format that they put together as a contract. How somebody knows how much it's going to cost to rebuild right now is very difficult to ascertain, because we don't even have completed plans at this stage.
Well, that was the trigger for me, that somebody that's promising that really isn't a promise. It's just kind of a guess and a hope at that point. Mike, would you be leery of that if you were these people?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard instances where somebody had a certain amount for the demolition, and then when they got a demolition price, guess what? It came in right underneath what they had available. And so, yeah, I would be leery. And at the same time, which we'll talk about later, I think, with some of the contract issues, you need to make sure that your contract includes exactly what is included as far as finishes, level of finishes, and all that kind of stuff. And I still think you should have a little bit of additional room for other expenses. If the builder's not taking care of all your pre-construction expenses, permitting, and probably some sort of a contingency amount for changes that happen during construction, you really want to make sure you have some additional funds available.
But if somebody, they're impatient, they want to get started, and I'm on their side. They want to get back into a home as quickly as possible, so they're grabbing the first offer that sounds good. Is not likely to work out well, is the point I think you're making. What I'd like to know is, are they obligated to share the insurance amount that they'll get for rebuilding? Is it advisable that somebody tell a contractor that?
Well, there's two sides to that. As Mike indicated, if somebody is utilizing those thresholds to turn around and drive their price up to the threshold, no, that's not advisable. At the same token, if somebody has inadequate insurance coverage and they're trying to pursue a contractor rebuild, it's helpful for the contractor to know there's adequate insurance. And I'll use Fountain Grove as an example. If somebody had a home up in Fountain Grove and their insurance limits were $250, $300 a square foot to rebuild, for a product we know are going to be substantially more than that, they can't even get started. They need to work that out with the insurance company first. And it's helpful for that information to be shared so the contractor or whoever they're working with is not spending a whole bunch of time advancing a project that could never get started.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mike, any supplement to that?
No, I totally agree. Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. I mean, if it's a reputable contractor and you have a history with them, it's probably good to share that information with them. But at the same time, with others, if you throw that dollar amount out, it's quite possible the bid will come up right underneath that, regardless of where it should be.
Thank you. On to question number three that we received in the past several weeks. Can you tell me more, the homeowner asks, about why the costs to rebuild seem like they're going to be so much more than when we first built our home in 2004? I understand inflation has to be considered, of course, but some contractors we've talked to have said that the building costs could be 60 to 70% higher than what we paid originally. Are they right? Because it seems awfully high to us. Mike?
Yeah, that's it's still very tough to give people exact numbers. I think you could still come up with preliminary estimates, but at the end of the day, until we can get a completed set of updated documents and go out and get subcontractor and material pricing, it's very hard for us to give somebody that's pretty accurate. Having said that, based on 13 years of time that's passed since the 2004 date that they gave, I would actually expect that it could be higher than 60 to 70% increase. But again, we won't know until we can actually go through the pricing exercise.
Does that sound right to you, Craig?
I would concur with Mike, and I would also add the other component that we haven't taken into consideration, and that's the supply and demand factor. Until the plans are complete and we can actually go out and secure pricing, as Mike indicated, knowing the fact that we have a finite vendor pool in Sonoma County, subcontractors and suppliers, they are going to want to provide pricing based on completed plans, not estimates on uncompleted plans in advance. And at some point, everybody is going to reach capacity. They'll be able to give you a price, but they won't be able to start right away. So those things have to enter into consideration. You talked about the people that said they're impatient and they want to get started right now.
Yes.
So that could play into the pricing factor as well. It shouldn't, but it will.
Yeah, I think I've told people that if their house was the only one that burnt down, the cost to rebuild would be a certain amount. But the fact that 5,000 other houses burnt down just increased the price to rebuild their home, just because of the pressure that's going to be on the labor and material market.
I hadn't thought of this, but there really isn't any precedent to apply to this. Lake County suffered a terrible disaster and fires 2 years ago, and they lost a little under 1,400 structures. We're 5 times that, and so there's so many unknowns because we've not been through this before. What effect, as a side note, what effect do the Southern California fires have on supplies, labor, etc.? Do you think that's going to be a complicating factor, Craig?
I believe it is. There were vendors, subcontractors, suppliers out of Southern California that potentially could have come up here and assisted in the rebuilding process. Framers, plumbers, electricians, the like. But now they have their own communities to rebuild. So the motivation for them to drive north, halfway up the state and help us out for the next few years is pretty much lost on the basis of they need to help out their families and friends in Southern California. We still have the other 2 national disasters we're trying to deal with in Houston and in Florida, and those are also consuming a big part of the labor pool across the nation.
I think the other interesting thing was, if I recall hearing correctly, that and Keith could probably get this number, the percentage of homes that have not been rebuilt in Lake County is a pretty high percentage, and I would guess we're not going to come anywhere near that. I mean, I think that the percentage of people that are going to rebuild will be much higher here. And so that'll make it even more difficult.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, though, that the early signs after the fire is people locally in our 4 county areas, they go through and settle up or look at their insurance. There are some people who are deciding, no, I'm going to put my property on the market, sell the lot, and do something else, which is kind of heartbreaking that they feel the need to do that. But that has happened in Lake County, and we're going to be watching this over the next several years. Question number 4 that came in, gentlemen. A nice comment where they said, thanks for the good advice and your 10 tips at the first webinar. They were very helpful. But since I have never had a home built from scratch before, can you explain what a lien is and why you said that I have to have a lien-free project as you described it in the original webinar? Can you amplify on that a little bit, Mike?
Sure. This is kind of a long topic, and there's a lot of information on the Contractor State License Board website. But in general, a mechanic's lien is really a hold against your property, and it's filed by an unpaid contractor, subcontractor, laborer, or material supplier, and it's recorded with the county's recorder's office. And the result of a lien against your property could be foreclosure if the homeowner doesn't pay the lien, double payment for the same job, meaning that the homeowner, if he's released the money to the contractor and the contractor has not paid the subcontractor could file a lien. The homeowner to release the lien could have to pay the subcontractor the same amount he's already paid the contractor, so that'd be double payment. And then you could have a recorded lien on the property, which could affect the owner's ability to borrow against the property and such.
Craig?
Yeah, I would add to that, there's probably 3 or 4 key terms that the homeowner should be aware of. One of them is preliminary notice.
Preliminary
notice, which a legitimate licensed contractor or subcontractor will file it once he's put in contract by the general contractor to work on a homeowner's house that says, I've been contracted by Mike Beeler to rebuild your house, and I'm filing a preliminary notice so that you're aware that I'm under contract to work on your property. The second is what's referred to as a conditional lien release. So when that vendor submits a payment to the contractor, the homeowner should also be aware that the subcontractor or vendor should provide what's called a conditional lien release.
Conditional lien release.
It's a form that says I'm submitting a bill for X number of dollars, and once I'm paid, I'm releasing my lien rights. So the homeowner knows that that information is being communicated. After the payment has been rendered to that subcontractor or supplier, he should submit a second document, which is called an unconditional lien release. And that tells the homeowner, yes, I paid the contractor. He in fact paid the subcontractor. He has waived his lien rights by providing an unconditional lien release. And then the last document is a notice of completion. So once the work is 100% complete, a notice of completion should be filed. That's recorded. That's filed with the recorder's office, so that everybody is aware that there's a declaration that the work is complete. And if there are any outstanding invoices, people have a time certain to turn around and file any of their claims for unpayment. I believe it's 30 days for general contractors and
30 to 60, I think, or it was 30 for the subs
and 60 for the general contractor.
This has got to be unbelievably confusing to somebody who's not in the business. And so, Mike, you had some good advice. If a homeowner or anybody wants to know more about this, they can go to the Contractors State License Board website. I think it's cslb.com, but if Google it and it'll come up. But that's where you could read and get more information on it. All I know is that at the Builders Exchange, we've had a couple of calls from people that are panicky out of the debris removal that they've already gotten a lien and because some subcontractor hadn't been paid. That's a frightening thing to, even though it says at the top, this is not a bill. There was one person said, well, I wrote a check and was sending it off because I'm so afraid I'll lose my property. Are they at risk of this at this point, or is that just, as you mentioned, the starting point?
Well, it pretty much every one of our jobs, once the owners start getting preliminary lien notices, I get a call like, what's going on, and they're panicking. But a preliminary lien notice is just like what Craig says. It really is just a document that is sent to the lender, if there's a lender, the homeowner, and the general contractor, that from the subcontractors and suppliers, saying that we will be supplying labor and or materials to your site, and be aware that we really expect to be paid. And so if you're working with a reputable contractor through a normal billing process, when we submit an owner billing, we will submit copies of the conditional lien releases. As our policy, we issue joint checks to our subcontractors if they have conditional lien releases from their suppliers. And then in the following month, we follow up with unconditional lien releases from all of those vendors to ensure, for the owner's benefit, that all of these people have been paid.
So somebody doesn't need to go into full panic mode if they get a notice. Just follow through on the process, because that's sometimes just a normal part of rebuilding. Yeah,
the subcontractors have 20 days from when they start work on the project to file the preliminary lien. So you will be getting those preliminary liens throughout the process, depending on when the subs start work. But
Thank
it's
you.
Nothing to be scared of.
CSLB's website, if you want more details, or contact the Builders Exchange. We can help you. Question number 5 is the follow-up. A homeowner said, somebody told me that whatever pre-construction work that you talked about could actually take as long to do and complete as the construction of my house itself. Is that true? And if so, why is the pre-construction work so time-consuming? Craig?
Well, there are a lot of variables that enter into that, Keith. Probably the first and foremost is, how old was your house? Because all homes that are being reconstructed have to be brought up to current code. That's architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, Title 24, CalGreen, fire sprinklers, landscape architects, civil, soils, and geotechnical. Once all those consultants have been coordinated and have begun their respective work, you're probably looking at anywhere from 2.5 to 5.5, 6 months to complete their work, depending on the complexity and the size
And that's
of the plans.
before anything's actually being built.
Absolutely. Then those completed documents then get submitted to the building department for the planning and permitting process. Concurrently, general contractors like Mike and myself would then be securing pricing from vendors because we now have accurate construction documents. So you could be looking at anywhere from, who knows, 4 to 6 months?
And Mike, that was probably under normal pre-fire conditions. This is going to exacerbate the problem to have this many people trying to rebuild. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to find out, and I think we have a question later that's going to address part of this, but we're going to find out once we get into the process and see how smoothly it's going and see how fast the county and or the city can process the paperwork. But I think there's a couple other items like HOA approvals.
Is that homeowner association?
Yeah, homeowners, some areas will have that. There's also possible septic and well inspections and stuff that need to be done as well. So there's if you look at the city of Santa Rosa process, it's pretty daunting. So the amount of paperwork that needs to be compiled needs to be accurate. And I think it depends, again, if you're rebuilding exactly what you had or if you're doing something new. I think that'll affect the time frame as well.
Oh, it's got to be scary to people out there, gentlemen. That's why either finding a really good consultant up front to handle all this for you, or a contractor that says, don't worry, I can handle all of this, is going to be critical.
Well, I think Craig mentioned this before we started, it's not the design firms are in the same situation that us contractors are. They have a certain amount of capacity. So they're going to have a certain amount of clients, and they're not going to be able to get to everybody on day one. So some of the projects are going to have to be a little bit farther down on the list.
Move on to question number 6. Has to do with costs, and I suspect the two of you get this kind of question all the time because I do at the Builders Exchange. Somebody asks, in your webinar, you explain that there are too many unknowns at the moment to be able to give a good estimate of what the cost of rebuilding homes will be. But now that we're a month or so beyond the webinar, are you able to give at least a hint as to what it's going to cost homeowners to rebuild? Maybe even a ballpark figure, or can that still not be done?
That's still really tough. I think the word you use, hint, is probably accurate. I think all of us will try to take a stab at it to give you a range, but until we get those completed documents and can put pricing on it, it's really hard to tell. But I know earlier we talked about it could be 80% over what something that was built in 2004. I think that's a possibility. And the only numbers I've heard that are fairly firm are the Coffee Park, the big builders who are saying in the 280 range. Those are the only numbers I've heard to date.
But those the big builders or developers, that's going to be for the homes that they bring to the table and have production homes where you choose one of their 5 models. It's not necessarily, and probably wouldn't be at that cost that you just cited, rebuilding the home that they had.
Exactly. I mean, those are the only numbers. Apparently they have a good handle on what those costs would be for their model. So if you wanted something outside of that, it'll be just like what we've talked about. You're going to have to get your drawings updated, and then you're going to have somebody give you some hard numbers.
Craig, it's got to be frustrating to people. It's like going into a store and you see something you like, or you want it, but nobody can tell you what the price is at the moment. But it's understandable. The unknowns we talked about in the webinar are still unknown as the time that we're recording this.
Absolutely. Until we have those plans updated and complete, along with all the engineering and the specifications, we're estimating in the dark. For all the reasons we explained in previous answers to the questions, I realize that it's very frustrating to the consumer. They want to have a number. If we tell them a number and the number is not accurate, either it's too high or too low, there's going to be a frustration level. So we're better off treating this like the old Dragnet series, just the facts, ma'am. we want to give them the facts, and we can't do that until we have the information.
Because there are no facts.
Correct.
Understandable. I think every day I hear different ranges from contractors who are just giving a ballpark figure, and it is in the 250 to 300 range in areas like Coffee Park, and I've heard numbers that are 2, 3, and 4 times that, depending upon what sort of bells and whistles you want in your big, beautiful custom home. It's just going to be a lot more costly. And I've been an advocate from the moment these terrible fires hit to not. You're better off giving no information than wrong information. And I think in this case, an estimate is a guesstimate, and as long as people understand it's just a ballpark figure, we can use some numbers, but nothing's firm yet. And how long will it be before somebody gets an idea? Once they've got all their plans in place, in hand?
Yeah, once the plans are complete and they're ready for submittal to the building department, then the contractor can secure pricing from the subcontractors and suppliers. But I want to tag on what we had discussed under the top 10 tips in the previous webinar, and that is that bunching or grouping for pricing purposes.
Bundling is what we use.
Will have a significant advantage. As a general contractor, if I'm taking 2, 3, 4 sets of plans to my plumber, my electrician, my framer, and say, I've got this group of 4 houses I'm doing, give me a price because I'm going to utilize your firm for these 4 houses, then they know as they're providing quotes for us, they're quoting not on one house, but they're quoting on multiple houses. They can figure out the economies of scale on their end as we can as well.
Boy, I'm glad you brought that back up, Craig, because that was tip number 1 that we offered up. Bundle, try to get a number of homes in your area. There's just economies of scale there that would be the case in any business, but particularly this one. Well, let me go on to question number 7. Somebody said to us after listening to the webinar, I've had bad experiences with getting permits and inspections in the past from governments in both Sonoma and Mendocino County in particular. Are any of these government agencies making any changes that'll make it easier, quicker, or at least less painful? Kind of a snarky question, but it isn't the first time we've heard about problems with getting permits from local governments. Craig?
Well, the city of Santa Rosa, and because that's where most of the rebuilding I'll be doing, has published their protocols on their website, on the Sonoma County Recovers.
Protocols meaning how they're going to approach this.
Exactly.
Okay.
They have published timelines depending on what you're doing. If you're rebuilding like in kind, or you're making minor modifications or significant modifications to the plan. What we don't know, though, is the inspections. I'll let Mike address that on the inspection side.
Yeah, I put the answer to your basic question as time will tell until we get into the process, I think, and to see if, municipalities have always had approximate timelines for what they think that they're going to take to process your permit documents, and what word should I use? A lot of the times it doesn't come in when they anticipate it. And then Craig's right, when it comes down to the inspections, the county's talking about adding staff, and the city's adding outside consultants, and I don't know if that's going to be utilized for their inspections as well. But at the end of the day, once people start building and hundreds of homes are calling for foundation inspections or whatever, we're going to have to see if that's going to be a log jam in the process.
At least in Sonoma and Mendocino counties, particularly Sonoma, I give them an A for first efforts here of addressing the problem, recognizing that with the magnitude of this disaster in the 4 county area, government can't conduct their permitting inspections in the process as they did in the past. Those days are gone. So I personally give them high marks for the planning they're doing, but now it's a matter of whether they can carry it out, whether they do have the personnel and the capability to follow through on their promises. So it's kind of a waiting game, but I'm hearing good things about what they're trying to do.
Yeah, from day one they've been answering phones, which is great. When you call down to the city, you can get a hold of people. But I think a lot of it's really going to be on the people submitting your package for permitting. Is your package complete? Is everything there? Is all the T's crossed and the I's dotted? If you go in with a good package, then hopefully they can process it in a timely manner. If you go in with something that's incomplete, it's going to get kicked back, and then all bets are off.
Yeah, but that's always been that way. Cities and counties or agencies will tell you, look, sometimes it's not our fault that this gets delayed because we didn't have anything that we could legitimately sign off on. So that's something else to watch out for. Number 7, make that number 8. I think someone mentioned during the first webinar that a homeowner could act as their own general contractor and oversee the building process of their own home if they want to do. The question they have is, I know you're in the business of building and will say it's probably a bad idea, but exactly why is it a bad idea? I found out I'm underinsured and I've got to save some money on my rebuilding somehow. Is this one of the ways I could do it? Mike?
Yeah, interesting. And again, your last sentence is what's important here. If you're underinsured and you're trying to save money, I would maybe look at what Craig had mentioned before about maybe partnering with some of your neighbors. Because I said and I was fortunate my house didn't burn down, but I said if my house burned down, I wouldn't want to, as a contractor, I wouldn't want to rebuild it myself.
Really?
If I have the insurance, why wouldn't I want to hire a contractor to take care of everything for me? Because it's a lot of work to rebuild your home. And so I was telling people, yeah, I would hire, maybe even Craig here if you could get the right dollar amount, but hire somebody else so that it takes the pressure off of me and I can go about my daily life. Yes, somebody can totally be an owner builder, and it might. I've heard from some retired people that they might be interested in this process, but there's definitely some downside to being an owner builder when it comes to liability, and I'll let Craig talk about what subcontractor pricing and things.
Makes sense to me what he just said.
Well,
Craig.
absolutely, as Mike indicated, you're going to have an impact when it comes to pricing. For subcontractors and suppliers, pricing to a general contractor, they're typically going to get more preferred price, better pricing than a consumer off the street would be, because they're accustomed to working with the general contractor. They know what his organizational setup is, how he schedules, how he pays, how the job rolls smoothly and freely, because they're working with a professional who knows what they're doing versus somebody that's trying to do this for the first time. That's not to say that if somebody has the bandwidth and can do it, they shouldn't give an attempt. But they're potentially going to lose the opportunity of the expertise from the general contractor's perspective of what widget goes next before the previous one, and also the pricing.
Yeah, when I first saw the question that came in, I thought of a lot of reasons why it's not a good idea. Time consuming, and if you don't have expertise, a lot of things can go wrong. I hadn't thought about the pricing. A contractor can get better deals on material and hold a subcontractor's feet to the fire better than a homeowner can.
Probably one of the best analogies I saw was in a repair shop one time when it had the published rates per hour, and it said the mechanics rates per hour were $100 an hour. If you wanted to watch, it was $110, and if you wanted to help, it was $120. So the concept holds true. Subcontractors are accustomed to working with professionals, which know that you know how to build a house in the correct sequence and nothing is missed.
Yeah.
When they show up to the job, it's ready, and the previous vendors are done with their work that don't impact your phase of work.
Yeah, and I would hope scheduling-wise, a contractor should be able to get a home built faster. I have just a quick story. When I was working FEMA, I had a great couple that came in. And
At the assistance center,
and he was an electrical engineer, and on his house he wanted to do the wiring, and the contractor said, yeah, no problem, and he went and did all the wiring, and he was pretty stoked about it. At the end of the day, he asked the contractor, it took him a certain amount of time, and he asked the contractor, well, how long would it have taken your guy? And it was like a third of the time. And so while he got some satisfaction out of wiring the home, I guess the point is that there are people who could probably do it quicker and get you back into your home sooner. So.
But if somebody's committed to doing that, has the time, enough expertise they think to do it, it can be done, but it's got a lot of asterisks next to it. Is that the bottom line for this?
Yeah, there's different insurance liabilities and what we talked about before with the whole lien process. I mean, you really take on a lot more responsibility as a homeowner if you own or build.
Concur.
Thank you, gentlemen. Question number 9. What are the consequences, someone asked, both financially and in getting permits and all the pre-construction work? What are the consequences if we don't want to rebuild the exact home that we lost? Are there penalties, restrictions, financially or otherwise, if someone wants to do that? Craig?
Yeah, if you go to the City of Santa Rosa's website, they've published processes for the permitting. And they talk about rebuilding like in kind, minor modifications or significant modifications, square footage, elevation change, etc. I would construe this question as being, I want to make significant changes. I want to alter my floor plan, add some square footage, maybe change how it looks on
Yes.
the outside.
Yes.
So that's going to put you in what they call the priority process, which they're estimating to take 3 to 5 weeks. In addition, you're going to be subjected to any impact fees if you add additional square footage.
Okay, stop right there. Explain the impact fee. A number of people have never built a home and maybe aren't aware of those.
Right. So the estimate for submitting the plans is approximately $3,000, and the permit and the inspections approximately $2,000 based on like in kind. If you're adding square footage, you have now introduced an impact to the City of Santa Rosa. The impact can be school impact fees, it can be parks and recreation fees, it can be community facilities fees, or public or any other impacts which are listed on the City of Santa Rosa's website. The two impacts that potentially or probably wouldn't change would be sewer and water, because you're not changing any impact there because you already had a sewer lateral, you already had a water meter.
Yeah. So are there any impacts for property assessment taxes if you downsize or increase? You're going to pay more if your home's bigger. It'll have a higher assessment. I talked to somebody that was going from 4,000 square feet down to a 3,000 square foot home as their plan, largely because they didn't have the insurance to cover their own home. Will they pay fewer taxes? Are there any implications that are positive?
I mean, they should. I mean, once the county comes in and does a reassessment, if their property in whole is valued at less amount, they should pay less.
Yep.
The one thing for sure, the city won't give you a credit back on the fees because you reduce the square footage.
They won't.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing that I think is important is if you're making all these changes, other than just getting through the process at the city or the county, just your upfront design time will potentially take longer. I mean, if you're just asking an architect to update your current plans, that's one thing, but if you start changing floor plans and exterior elevations, that typically takes them a little longer to prepare them.
Sure, but I could understand somebody who the tragedy of losing your home doesn't make it all worth it, but now that you've got a property and you're starting from scratch, most people I know would change something about the home they live in. Even those who haven't lost their homes, there's just something in there that you wish you could change, and people are probably going to look for that option. And so it can be done. There are some consequences and implications of doing it.
And cost. There's cost implications too on the design and potentially
Right.
on construction.
And definitely on the timing, but given the opportunity, and I hate to use that word, but I'm going to use it for lack of any other
No, it's
right
fine.
now, given the opportunity for somebody to do it over again because they've lived in their house for 10 or 15 years and they know what their lifestyle is, they know whether or not they need that extra bedroom, if they want that wall, if they want a window in some place. If they recognize the fact, as Mike said, they're going to increase the cost, and they also recognize the fact that it's going to increase the amount of time it's going to take the architect and the other consultants to get the plans done, they should get what they want. It's their house.
But I've also said too, I've had a couple of clients come in and the architect's recommending changes that I think will be more beneficial when they turn around and resell the house later.
I see.
So some of these changes to maybe create a more open floor plan or pick a new roof line, there's some other advantages which could benefit you in the long run.
Boy, there's so few silver linings in this horrible black cloud of the wildfires. This may be one of them, that you get something you want more than what you had. It's just a tough way to have to get there. The last last question I might help out on. Somebody asked, when and where can I talk to or meet some contractors who might be interested in rebuilding my home? You guys scared me during the webinar when you talked about how few contractors there might be. Let me tackle this one for a moment, and Craig, Mike, you can supplement it. The Builders Exchange, as I said at the opening, is a contractors association, and so what we realize we can probably do best for the community and to help the victims of the fires is try to match up contractors who can actually take on additional work with homeowners who have a lot of work that needs to be done. So we have and continue to survey all of our contractor members to ask them, are you able and willing? Do you have the capacity, as we refer to it, to take on rebuilding projects over the next 1 to 5 years? So we're collecting the data not just on every contractor who, frankly, most of them were busy before the fires. We're trying to carve out of the herd those who actually will talk to homeowners and who can take on additional work, both general contractors to oversee the project and subcontractors. So very soon, you should, I'm advising homeowners, go to our website at ncbeonline.com, and there'll be a bot that you can click on, and up will pop all of the people, all the contractors who have told us they can take on additional work. So use the Builders Exchange as a resource. We also said, if you know somebody, a friend of a friend, a family member, if you know somebody in the business, even if they can't take on your project, talk to them. They may know somebody who they are aware can take on additional work. So expand your own personal outreach to find anybody in the business that might be able to advise you. But again, utilize the Builders Exchange that we do serve Sonoma Lake, Mendo, and Napa counties, so we'll be able to help. If you are listening to this follow-up program prior to mid-March, please know that the North Coast Builders Exchange will have expanded booth space at the Home and Garden Show held at the fairgrounds in Santa Rosa. And the Home and Garden Show draws thousands of people. Well, we're making ourselves available at that show for fire victims and others who want to build to come to our booth, and we're going to have contractors there on site that have said they're able to take on more work, and even if they can't, they'll be able to give you some good, solid advice. I believe the Home and Garden Show in Sonoma County is March 16th, 17th, and 18th. So watch social media and the print and broadcast media for details, but come visit us and we'll be able to help you. That's going to be it for our follow-up program. We may be doing more of these in the future if we get lots more questions, and your questions can be sent to the Builders Exchange at info@ncbeonline.com. info at ncbeonline.com. Send us your questions. We'll bring back these pros and others to try to give you advice. Our organization thinks we owe it to you. You've suffered enough with a loss. We're going to try to help make the process of rebuilding your home and your lives a lot easier than it might be otherwise. My sincerest thanks to Mike Beeler of Beeler Construction, Craig Lawson of Cal Custom Building Services, and we also owe a debt of thanks to Tom Boylan of the Boylan Point Agency, a board member of ours, for his help today. So our best wishes to all of you. We'll continue to keep you informed, and contact the Builders Exchange if there's any way we can help. I'm Keith Woods of the Builders Exchange, North Coast Builders Exchange, and that concludes our program.